So the next bit's about conflict management. How do we resolve conflict? So I'd like you, by show of hands, to just answer the question, who's ever been in a conflict with another person?
Yes,
Great, so we have some people who don't know anyone, that's okay. Conflict is a pretty natural part of life. This is a study from 2008, so it's a little bit dated, and it's in the workplace. But 85% of employees have dealt with some level of conflict. 29% reported that they're dealing with conflict on a frequent basis. That was in 2008, that was in the workplace. I wonder if you think... What about conflict? When two people have an opposing idea. Drama, there we go. And then just think about your family. Have you ever had conflict in your family? Or does everyone just love each other and just get on harmoniously all the time? Conflict is a part of life. As we go through this, if you can you think of a recent conflict that you've had? So it might be with someone you work with, might be with a sibling, might be with a parent, might be with someone on one of your teams that you serve with, like a conflict, difference of opinion, difference of ideas, that's caused some friction, some drama, in John Luke's words. So just think about that in your mind. I'm not going to ask you to share, so if you've got conflict with the person next to you, you're okay. But how did you feel about the person that you're in conflict, the person you're arguing with? How did you feel about them during that argument, during that time of conflict? So I heard angry, yeah?
Frustrated.
You felt frustrated, yeah? Yeah. The bad emotions start coming out.
Sometimes
Unheard? Unheard, yeah? Invalidated, yeah?
Bit confused.
You felt confused, yeah? Yep, so conflict often brings up feelings that we don't want. I don't know too many people personally who love conflict. I don't know too many lawyers personally, but I'm told that they really enjoy the arguing and the conflict and the tussle. I like an intellectual debate, but I don't like conflict. You know, like a difference of ideas or spurring each other on to really nuance the ideas, but not conflict itself. But now I want you to consider the way you felt about that person, right? And maybe you felt that you were unheard. Maybe you felt that there wasn't full clarity around the issue, but you just knew that there was some conflict. And then just have a look at this image. So this is what psychologists call the fundamental attribution error. FAE. I don't know if that's ever going to be an acronym, but basically the fundamental attribution error says that we tend to equate what people do, their actions, their behaviors, their external things that we can see, with who they are as people. So when someone does something we don't like, we start to think we don't like that person. So we conflate the idea, the action, the activity with, actually, I don't like that person because I don't like what they're doing. So that's called the fundamental attribution error, and I've experienced it often.
That's how it's supposed to work.
That's how it's supposed to work, says John Luke. Great.
You're a liar, right?
Yeah?
Nice.
That's just a definition. Cool. But consider the two scenarios, and this is a comic. So we've got old mate with the yellow hair. He's running into a meeting late, and he was stuck in traffic. That's what's going through his little speech bubble. But this guy in the red tie has gone. He's just slept in. He's just lazy. He's just not here on time because he doesn't know how to get things in his life in order, right? I'm assuming this is the next day or the week later, and we've got the roles reversed. He's gone, I was just stuck in traffic, but this person's gone, actually that person is lazy. That person didn't know how to manage their time well. So when we don't have all of the information, right, we start to assign the actions and how it made us feel or what it did for us or didn't do for us to the person. That's called the fundamental attribution error. And there can be other environmental factors. There can be things that cause the other person to think that way and to act that way, that if we're unaware of, we can't show compassion and mercy. Think about someone who you've been really angry with, and then you found out that they've just lost a family member, and you go, oh, their behavior starts to make sense now. I didn't know that they were grieving. I didn't know that they were under all that stress. And so before we have all the information, we can jump to conclusions, and we're just assessing the actions and how it made us feel. But the reason why they were acting in that way, which may not have been a great way, was because there was something else, some other pressure in their world. So we said sometimes you feel unheard, sometimes we don't hear other people, and that can cause conflict as well. So with the fundamental attribution error, we can arrive at a place where we're disagreeing over the best way to cook an egg. Something trivial, doesn't really matter. But all of a sudden we start to hate the person because I don't like the way that they like to cook eggs. Therefore, I hate the person. Yeah, I'm very particular with how our dishes are done. So, but if it's the egg kettle, it can be that. Yeah, but you've got to have a separate kettle for that.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. But so conflict. We've got these bad. Like when we think about conflict, no one, generally speaking, no one loves conflict because it doesn't make us feel great. We feel unheard, or maybe we jump to conclusions. Maybe we get angry and we get upset. There might just be tension. People start taking sides. People start blaming us for stuff. Like conflict is not generally a good thing. But conflict in itself is not actually bad. So I've got some quotes from some smart people. This is Warren Bennis. He's a leadership guru. He says leaders, that's people who are leading teams, they shouldn't avoid conflict. They don't avoid conflict. They don't repress it, they don't deny it. But they see it as opportunity. They say, hey, two people are thinking differently, right? Let's get to the bottom of the story to figure out why they're thinking differently and what's the best outcome for our company. He's thinking in terms of company terms. Right? Someone else, Margaret Heffernan, says, for good ideas and true innovation, you need to have human interaction. You do need to have conflict. You do need to have an argument. You do need to have debate. Because otherwise, if I like my eggs fried and someone else likes them scrambled, right? How are we going to prove which one is the best? If there's no conflict, we go, oh, yeah, just do what you want. Like, there is objectively a better way to do eggs, right? How are we going to figure it out? Might be boiled. It might not be one of our ideas. I like fried. Someone else likes scrambled, but it is poached. Is the best way. But we can get. I don't like poached eggs. But
Oh my gosh, Lachlan. I was just asking what poached eggs are.
So we can read from the sheet. All the notes are there, right? But I want to suggest that what matters is not the disagreement, not the difference of ideas, not necessarily even the thought that, hey, this person is currently in the wrong, because this person's running into a meeting late. They are in the wrong. They should, the social expectations that you get to the meeting on time. But what matters is not the behavior. What matters is not the conflict itself, like whether I like eggs one way, you like them a different way. What matters is our motivation. That's what I want to suggest to you. Ask yourself the question, what matters more in the scenario? Me being right and getting my way, or having the best outcome, actually finding out what is scientifically the best way to do eggs? Like, which one matters more? Most of the time, once I get fixated on an idea, I'm like, fried eggs all the way. That is the way to do it. I'm not going to move. I'm not going to budge. But then I get invested, and my motivation is actually for me to maintain my pride, for me to be right. It's not to listen to the scientific facts about the nutrients in egg and the taste and how that makes it pop on your tongue or whatever else that someone else could bring to the conversation. But I've just decided in my head, I am right and this is the way it's going to be. So what matters is our motivation. Are we trying to protect ourselves and our pride? Are we trying to protect our idea? Or are we prepared to say, no, the reason why I have my opinion is because I've arrived here with my experience, but I'm open to someone else's idea and experience. That could actually make my life better. That could actually make, if you're working in a team, that could actually make our team scenario even better. So what matters is the motivation and keeping a pure motivation through it all. In a healthy environment, I think that's my last slide. In a healthy environment, conflict can typically be overcome by talking to each other, by actually hearing what the other person has to say, by understanding why they've arrived at their conclusion. And sometimes it's just a matter of talking it out and realizing actually that's your opinion. And it's a subjective taste that you have, and actually it's a subjective taste that I have, so it doesn't matter. So the conflict can fizzle because we've had a discussion. Or we might have a discussion and go, right, we want to collaboratively work on what is the best outcome. I've got an idea, you've got an idea. Maybe there's a third idea that we haven't considered yet, which is better. So let's hold our ideas up to the light. Let's see which one's going to be the best for our goals, which one's going to work best in the real world, which one's going to achieve what we want to achieve. It might be that we choose one of the ideas, but we change it, we tweak it a little bit to add a bit of the other person's idea in to make an even better idea. But what matters is the motivation, chatting through the solutions, and collaboration's really cool in a healthy environment. That's when everyone's on the same page. Gary Chapman talks about exactly what you said, Lachlan, about hearing and being heard. Thanks, Florence.
No, Dad, it's my turn.
She does this all the time. Talks over the top of me. So this is a quote from Gary Chapman. When we respond too quickly, we often respond to the wrong issue. We often respond to... Yep, it's in the grey and the italics. When we respond too quickly, we respond to the wrong issue. So I've got my defenses up because you disagree with me, so all of a sudden I'm trying to come and defend my position and attack your position. I haven't listened through to focus on what the real issue is and what the real value could be by us working on it together. So when we listen, when we understand, when we respect each other's ideas, then we can find a solution where both of us are winners. Most of the time. Sometimes there's a zero-sum scenario where you can't share a resource. Like if the youth are in your auditorium, you can't also have the prayer meeting in the auditorium. I mean, you could, but it would not work, right? It's not going to work for either group. So there's a zero-sum argument. Someone's going to lose out. There's a limited resource. Something's finite. So you could brainstorm some other ideas, be like, oh, maybe prayer meeting could be here, youth could be here, we could stagger the times. Like you can brainstorm a whole lot of different things, but sometimes there's one resource, you're restricted, the youth and the prayer meeting can't happen in the same space at the same time. So that's where you negotiate. That's where you say, okay, we'll do the prayer meeting this Friday, you guys can do youth next Friday. And you've got to work it out between the two people. You realize that someone's going to win and someone's going to lose, but you've got to make a call. And often we'll need a third party to come and help mediate that, because I might really want youth to be in the auditorium. Senior pastor might really want the prayer meeting to happen. So we need a third person to help. But in that scenario, senior pastor's my boss, right? So he's going to get what he wants because he's the authority. So it could be a mediator, or you might be appealing to an external authority to say, no, I'm making the decision, this is how it's going to be. I understand that you're going to miss out, I understand that you're losing out, but this is what needs to happen.
So when you call in a third party, both have to agree that whatever decision that third party makes is what they go with?
Yeah. So in conflict resolution, it's a really healthy step to actually agree on the ground rules before you start. Say, we'll get to some of the really practical things, but you agree to say, hey, we're just going to be talking only about the issue. We're not going to get personal. And you agree that actually we both want and need a resolution, because this is a problem, and we're going to honor whatever outcome there is and not hold a grudge over it. And so you set some expectations as part of that. That's really a healthy way to do it. There's very commonly 4 styles of management, of conflict management. And I mean, as I go through them, just have a think about what your natural style is. The first one is competing. That's where you just take your idea and you're going to argue for it and you're going to try and bash the other idea down. You get 2 people in the room who both have the same idea. It's like a sales pitch, or 2 politicians having to go at each other. It can get nasty. There's compromising, where you're trying to sort of work out, trying to negotiate a little bit of my thing, a little bit of your thing, and you're trying to find a happy medium or some sort of compromise. There's avoiding conflict. Put your head in the sand. It doesn't exist. Don't want to know about it. Don't want to deal with it. That's another way of managing conflict. Sorry? The earth is flat. Yep. And just put your head in the sand. And then there's accommodating. Accommodating is where you're the bigger person and you allow the other person's position or idea to win, and you've let that happen. So those are 4 common styles. Just have a think about what your natural style is. And it doesn't really matter what your natural style is, because in the process that I'll tell you in a little bit, it doesn't matter what your style is. It's hopefully a helpful process to go through to resolve conflict or to help someone else resolve conflicts. You might see this tension happening between some co-workers. You might see the youth having a go at each other, and you're like, I can help with this. Let's go through some of this process. Let's mediate this. Let's make sure both sides are being heard. I did peer mediation training when I was in year 6, so I am qualified in that. My school, this is legitimate. My school put us through peer mediation training so that we could solve problems in the playground. I have a certificate, so I'm qualified. Yeah. Yes. But I also want to give you a biblical perspective. So I've spoken a lot of very general things about conflict resolution, conflict management. Let's look at the Bible. So I don't have any slides for it, but we can look at Matthew 5. If you're offering a gift at the altar and then remember that your brother or sister has something against you, if you've had an argument, leave the gift in front of the altar. First go and reconcile, then come and offer your gift. Right, this is Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. He's saying it's important that you live at peace with your brother and sister. Don't try and get righteous before God if you're not living at peace with your brother and sister. When Jesus was questioned, what is the greatest commandment? His response was, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. So it's a love that comes from God that we pass on to others. So don't hold grudges and don't have conflict. We'll read on more about bless those who persecute you. Bless and don't curse. Don't be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Don't repay evil with evil, but be careful to do what is right within the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, so far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. So Jesus doesn't want our churches, he doesn't want Christians to be known to be the antagonists who just start conflict and walk away. He wants them to be known as peacemakers, particularly in churches, to be united around a common cause, around his mission. In James 1, we're given some practical help. Brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness God desires. So listen to one another so that you don't get worked up. You don't decide that you're going to be right no matter what before you've even heard the reason why the other person thinks they're right. It's quite helpful to consider that sometimes conflict cannot be resolved. And the Bible has mechanisms for dealing with it. This one's not directly relating to conflict, but it is relating to sin. If you see someone who is sinning, go to that brother and sister, point out their fault, just between the two of you. Give them a friendly, hey, I've noticed you're doing something, it's not right before God. If they listen to you, you've won them over. Good job. But if they won't listen to you, then take one or two others along so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If they still refuse to listen, tell the church. If they refuse to listen and submit to the authority of the church and their pastor, treat them as you would a pagan and a tax collector. That means to cut them out of your congregation, have nothing to do with them, to ostracize them. And that's a pretty harsh teaching. But what it's saying is there are some people who are just so stubborn and stuck in their ways, and some people who, no matter how much you do the right thing, they are not. And Jesus says, don't throw your pearls to the swine. Again, it's not directly in context, but he's saying don't waste your energy if this person has already put a stake in the ground. Said this is not happening. Always be prepared to extend grace and love at a future date, absolutely. The pagans and the tax collectors could come back in if they repented. It's not like we're cutting them off, excommunicating them forever, but saying until they change their mindset, it's not worth our energy. It's a harsh teaching, but it's one that, as we get into unhealthy environments, it's important to consider. So unhealthy environments. If everything is healthy and you're motivated by trying to find the best result for your teams, or rationally understanding that actually if I get my way, then this person's not going to get their way and they're going to miss out. So I'm a good citizen. I would like to try and find a compromise, try and negotiate, try to get the best outcome for both parties. That's a healthy environment. That's sort of what we expect to happen. But you can also have unhealthy environments. Does anyone know of a toxic personality or been part of a team that had a really toxic culture? I saw some pointing going on there. Interesting. No. But when I say toxic, do you know what I mean? It's an environment where there's a lot of blaming going on. There's no accountability, or it's an environment where the morale is really low, where someone tries to do something and they just get shot down, where people intentionally derail conversations, intentionally derail good work in order that it doesn't succeed. Like, this is a toxic place. Not here, I'm just saying this is what I'm talking about. So if there are toxic individuals, people who are just out to spite you or spite your efforts, if you've got those individuals, or if your team culture is that way, where you don't want to see anyone else succeed, all you're trying to do is bring people down. The motivation of those toxic cultures and toxic people is no longer for the best outcome. They're purely trying to bring things down. They're purely trying to get their own way. They're purely trying to shift the blame. Whatever their motivation is, it is not for the best outcome. So when that happens, I think the best thing we can do is try and return to the values that we have. I've been in teams where there was a toxic culture. I've been in teams where there was a toxic individual who was just making life miserable for others. And oftentimes management is slow to do something about it. Oftentimes that person's been in the team for a very long time, or they have one bit of information or one bit of knowledge that no one else really has, and so everyone's sort of reliant on them for that thing, and so they get kept around when they probably shouldn't be kept around, because it's more healthy for the team if they weren't there. If you find yourself in that situation, the conflict resolution techniques won't work, because they're not acting in the best interests of the people or the product or the entity. That's not the way they're thinking. They're purely thinking selfishly. They're just like that sinner who said, no, I've put my stake in the ground. This is what I think, and you can't make me do anything differently. But we can't, if we're not the boss, if that's a team member, if that's even someone in our family, we can't just kick them out. What we've got to do is we've got to rally around. So they're currently being motivated by something probably selfish, seeing their own agenda happen. We've got to try and shift the team or shift that person to be motivated again by a value that we can agree on, so that everyone's on the same page again. Not their own agenda, but something that they say, oh, this would be good. So we'll try and shift their idea. Hopefully you're still with me. So for dealing with the toxic environments, emphasize and reinforce your shared values. So a person is like, really bringing the team down. They're just cutting down every idea. That won't work, that won't work. You guys are wasting your time. When you do try and do something good, they're sabotaging it so it doesn't happen, so that it never happens. Try blessing them. Try moving towards them and saying, and figuring out their values. Try getting them alongside and say, hey, wouldn't you love it if we were able to do this? And hopefully we'll say, yeah, no, that would be good. And just little by little, you keep reinforcing and returning them to the values over time. And as a team, if you've got a poor culture within your team, as a leader, you can start reinforcing your values. So, hey, one of our values is integrity. One of our values is transparency. One of our values is always showing love. One of our values is never blaming. One of our values is creative innovation. We want to empower people. We don't want to step on their dreams. And you just return to the values and keep reinforcing them to hopefully bring the team back into a value system rather than a selfish agenda. That's tough to do. It takes a long, long time. I've not actually been part of a team where it's been successfully done myself. But the experts told me it's possible. So that's something you can do if you find yourself in a really unhealthy environment. You can, even if you're not the leader, the supervisor, you can be a person who keeps reminding everyone else why we're here, what our goal is, and what our values are, to try and keep things on track as much as possible. If you find yourselves in, and the other important things is call out behaviors that don't align with the values. So if you've got these values that say we don't blame, we have a culture where we don't blame people, we correct and encourage. When someone just blatantly blames someone, you go, actually, that's not what we do here. And so you call out to try and reinforce. Does that make sense? When you find yourself in conflict, I've given you some really simplistic, and I don't mean simple, I mean simplistic, because there's lots of nuances, there's lots of different ways these could go. But hopefully it's a starting point. This is a process, this is a way you can think. This is a way you can help the youth if they're struggling with a family member. This is a way that you can help a team member who's struggling with one of their other colleagues. You're a third party of this. You can step them through these steps, these processes. So the first thing is don't ignore the issue. The conflict management strategy of avoiding the conflict is not a good one. It's unlikely to go away. Most of them will fester. Most of them will explode bigger than they ever were. So don't ignore the issue. Sit down and clarify what the actual issue is. Chat with the person. Figure out, do I not like you? Is it a personality problem? Or do we actually have a difference of opinion, a difference of idea? And write down what your goal is. Write down, what do we actually think needs to happen here? What is the best outcome? Regardless of whose idea wins, what is the best outcome? And at that point, don't bring in other things. Don't start heaping on, the last time you're in conflict as well. No, just keep it about the current conflict, the current disagreement of ideas. Hear the other person out. Actually, don't just listen to them, actually understand where their argument's coming from and make sure that they understand yours. It might take quite a while to speak that between the two people. The other really cool thing about understanding someone is it's really difficult to hate someone who you understand. A lot of different examples about racism and when people of different ethnicities who stereotypically dislike each other, there might have been warring tribes, right? There might just be people from different sides of the same city who have different skin colors, right? They've got all these ideas about the other race, about those other people. But when they actually got to meet one of those others, they got to understand them, got to hear their story, got to realize that there's a lot of similarities. They find it really, really difficult to assign those negative associations of the race with that particular person, the person they just met, their friend. So understanding and having a relationship with someone makes it really, really tough to actually hate them, really tough to have a stereotypical agenda against them. Keep the person and their ideas separate. So we spoke about this fundamental attribution error. Actually keep the idea separate to the person. If I don't like John Luke's idea, right, we can debate the idea over and over again, but as much as possible, don't let it affect the relationship that I have. It's just an idea. Let's hold it at arm's length. Let's work on it out here and get a resolution. We don't have to hold it close to our chest and don't have to let it fester and influence us. Don't view it as us and them. Don't make sides. Together, identify solutions, collaborate, understand there might be compromises need to be made. Actually agree that we need to resolve it as well. Agree that this is what we want to do. And agree what the process is. It might be that we can negotiate this between ourselves, or it might be like, hey, if we don't get a decision by 2 p.m. today, we're going to take it to our boss. Just so there's a clear pathway and this doesn't go on for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then as Christians, live at peace with the other person. Even if they've hurt you, choose to forgive them. That one's not in all the secular research, but it's important for us. To know that God wants us to live at peace. God wants us to have good relationship. He wants us to show love towards other people. So that's what I had to share with you on conflict resolution. Are there any comments or ideas, questions you want to throw out there?